Hello, friends. Good morning. My name is Herns. I'm the Cloud and Enterprise Business Lead for Microsoft Philippines, and welcome to today's webinar where we will be looking at and talking about an overview of all the services that are available on Azure today. So the webinar today is entitled simply, "What is Azure?" Just a few reminders that this webinar again is completely recorded from beginning to end, so you can actually listen to some parts or the entirety of this webinar in case you miss any of the parts here. So you'll actually receive an email with the URL to the location of the recording of this webinar, so you can use your device to listen to this webinar at any time or any day of your convenience. This is the series. This is the first in the series of webinars as well about everything about Azure, and we'll also have a couple of topics on Windows Server and SQL Server towards the next few weeks. So the schedule of the next webinars will be shown to you at the end of this particular webinar. You can also ask any questions in case you have any questions. You could go to the Q&A window to the webinar interface in your browser and then type in your question. And if we have time during this webinar or even after the webinar, we will be answering those questions later on. So if you have so now that we have those out of the way, we can now continue with the webinar. So again, today's webinar is about Azure. All right, now, what digital transformation represents a unique and timely opportunity for your company. So I'm sure that you're listening to this webinar, most of you are undergoing some form of digital transformation. So digital transformation is considered as the top priority of a lot of company leaders nowadays. The reason being technological advances again today has given organization leaders a lot of latitude in terms of what they can do to improve the way their businesses operate today. To us, digital transformation actually means is using the digital technology to improve the way you service your customers, the way you run your operations, the way you deliver your products, and how you empower your employees. Think about digital transformation as enabling something called the digital feedback loop. Digital feedback loop essentially means getting signals from across your businesses, meaning signals from your customers, from feedback from your customers or about your products and your services, data from your operations coming from your different operational systems, inputs from your employees, like for example, the amount of time that they're spending on work, for example, telemetry from your products. So for example, if you have if you have monitored enabled products, like for example, if you are an elevator manufacturer, for instance. So every elevator that you install is actually sending electronic or digital feedback to your systems on how the elevator is performing. Imagine a scenario where you are actually getting all of these signals and saving it in a massive database that is embedded with intelligence. And then using that intelligence to connect and synthesize the data across the signals across from your customers, operations, employees, and your products. And then, more importantly, and perhaps most importantly, using that intelligence to improve business outcomes across the way you service your customers, the way you run your operations, the way you improve your employees' well-being, so that they become more, shall we say, productive and empowered employees, and how you build better products. Now, this is where cloud computing comes in because a lot of these technology capabilities, and you will see a lot of examples, and you probably have heard a lot of examples about how companies have transformed their organization through cloud computing. Now, what are the benefits of cloud computing? You know that you've seen a lot of this in terms of examples, like for example, it being cost effective, it being scalable, it being elastic, meaning being able to have you having the ability to use cloud computing capabilities um, whether you can scale up or scale down. It's always current because the cloud computing providers usually give the latest and the greatest capabilities in terms of their platform. It is reliable because all of them, or if not most of them, or if not all of them, are backed up by service level agreements. And it is also global, or you can make it local if you want. And at the same time, they provide the highest levels of security. Now, when you talk about cloud computing, what type of cloud are we talking about? So this is a great illustration of what cloud computing really is. In the traditional on-premises set, your all of your All of your capabilities are run on-premise and therefore you manage them. So networking, storage, servers, virtualization, operating systems, middleware, runtime, all the way up to the applications. When you start going to the cloud and you use the cloud for infrastructure as a service, such as what Azure provides, you manage the applications all the way down to the operating system, but the cloud service provider actually provides everything from the networking, storage, servers, and virtualization. You don't have your own data center, but but Azure, for example, provides the ability for you to um, to create your own virtual machines using the operating systems that you want, and all of the and everything that runs in that operating system, from the middleware to the applications, is what you manage. Platform as a service, on the other hand, is when the cloud service provider such as Azure provides everything, including the operating system and the runtime environment, and everything that you need to run the applications and the data is already provided for you. So the only thing that you literally have to provide is just the application code and the data itself. So a perfect example of this is, let's say you wanted to run a website. So instead of providing everything that you would need to run a website yourself, such as all the operating system and the database, Azure will already provide the database and the application platform, if you will, to run the code. So all you need to do is to provide your, say, for example, your PHP code and your data on the database that will be provided by the platform, and then you now have a running website. Software as a service, on the other hand, like Office 365, everything is provided for by the cloud service provider, from networking all the way up to the application level. So the only thing that you need to provide is data about your users, and perhaps, like in the case of Office 365, your imported calendars and your email. But everything else is already provided for. Now, what are the different drivers, if you will, that organizations have looked at in terms of going to the cloud? What is driving them to go to the cloud? You can see that here in the slide. So many of the reasons would include things such as contracts within data center expiring already, so it doesn't make sense for them to continue their agreements with their current data center providers. They want to quickly integrate new customers, or sorry, new organizations that are part of their organization. They may have urgent capacity needs. So you may have an existing data center, but you're running out of space in your data center. You're running out of capacity such as storage and computing power. Software and hardware refresh is also a very common reason why you would not want to go to the cloud. So simply put, instead of instead of acquiring new hardware or new software, you just simply use whatever is in the cloud today, thereby avoiding capex. You want to increase your security posture. You want to increase your compliance posture. You want to make sure that you have the latest and greatest application platforms to run your applications. And also, you may have software that is already end of support, like for example, Windows Server 2008 or SQL Server 2008, which will end support in the year 2019 and 2020. So instead of replacing those applications, sometimes, for example, like in the case of Microsoft Azure, if you move any of those platforms like Windows Server and SQL Server 2018 versions, 2008 versions to Azure, you will actually get extended support once you move that to the cloud. The journey to the cloud includes both the approaches of migrating and innovating. So the basic steps of looking at how to integrate or to start your journey into the cloud is composed of looking at first your infrastructure, which is what your application runs on, your data, which is what your application works with, and your code, which is what your application does. So in these three aspects, every application or every system that you have that is running within your organization involves infrastructure, data, and code. The journey to the cloud requires looking at each of these aspects and making a decision where you just simply want to migrate, or do you want to innovate, or do you want to migrate first, then you innovate first, and then you innovate next. Then layering that on top, while you're migrating, or while you're innovating, now you have a mix of applications that are both in your on-premise environment and on the cloud. Layering unified management, security, governance tools, and also DevOps. Microsoft Azure, therefore, is an ever-expanding set of cloud services to help your organization meet your business challenges. Microsoft Azure currently contains about 200 plus different services. So this is just a screen cap or a representation of the different types of services that you have currently on Microsoft Azure. So our job as Microsoft Azure or Cloud Solution Architects, either me or you or anybody of our partners, is to take a look at each of these components and determine which, how many, and how to configure these components and put them together to solve a particular customer's um, cloud issue or cloud problem. So, for example, if you have an existing application and you decided to go to the migrate route, meaning you're not going to change a lot about the application, but therefore and then just simply migrate that to the cloud, the first question would be what infrastructure. Remember the previous slide where we talked about you have to figure out the infrastructure, the data, and the code of the application itself. What are the different components that you will need from Microsoft Azure to be able to migrate that application? So in the case of infrastructure, do you need a virtual machine? In the case of data, do you need to use a database? What type of database? And then in the case of the application itself, the code itself, how do you run the code? And how do you then migrate all of that? There are also a set of migration tools that are available on Azure so that you can be able to migrate those applications up to the cloud as quickly as possible. So that's essentially what Azure is. It's a set of different services, and our job as an architect is to figure out what services is required for what's needed. Now, roughly, Microsoft Azure's services can be divided into several categories. One would be the different set of tools, like developer tools, DevOps tools, and management of your cloud environment. There's also an environment where you can run infrastructure, compute, networking, storage, security, and identity. And then there are also a number of components where you can run application as a service or platform as a service. We call this collectively as serverless environments. So to run, for example, websites, mobile applications, functions, containers, integration services, and everything that you see there. So this webinar won't be able to discuss or not is we won't have the time to discuss in detail all of these capabilities, but in the future webinars we will be talking about these capabilities in greater detail. Now, Azure now currently operates as of today across 54 different regions. Now, these are regions; these are not data centers. Regions essentially means that each region has about 2 or 3 data centers, and all of the regions are dispersed across a wide geographical area across the world. So we also have data centers in Africa, and specifically in South Africa to cover the Africa region, and also in North America, Asia, Australia. So we are currently present across 6 continents across all over the world, and the number of regions are actually more than if you combine the regions between AWS and Google. So 54 regions worldwide. These are all interconnected by Microsoft owned and leased cable. That's about 100,000 miles of fiber and subsea cable. And we understanding that we are not able to create data centers or put up data centers across every country. So therefore, we extend the reach of Azure through what is called networking edge sites. And we have 130 plus edge sites all over the world. And one of those edge sites includes the Philippines. So, for example, in the Philippines, we don't have a data center, but we do have a network edge site, which means that if you are using a network service provider that is based in the Philippines, you are still guaranteed pretty good latency on our Azure services because we have effectively extended our networks through the network edge sites. 95% of the Fortune 500 use Microsoft Azure, so you can see a lot of the famous names over here. So through this webinar and also the future webinars, we may be able to talk about some examples of how some of these organizations use our cloud to solve a myriad of both technical and business problems. Now, Microsoft Azure also has 4 distinct properties: productive, hybrid, open, and trusted. So the next few slides, we will be talking about what we mean by Azure being productive, being hybrid, being open, and being trusted. So let's start first with productive. And and a better way and a good way to start explaining how productive is in Microsoft Azure. A good way to explain that is starting with the mode of cloud computing that is most familiar to everyone. One is which is infrastructure as a service or compute. Now, there are a number of different types of virtual machines that are available on Azure. So it can be entry level, it can be burstable virtual machines, all the way up to storage optimized. And we even have virtual machines that are specifically created to run SAP, Cray, and even NetApp works. For IaaS, we have compute capabilities, we have networking capabilities, and we have storage. Again, like I said, there are virtual machine capabilities that are purpose built for SAP, NetApp, Cray, and even VMware. 40% and 40% of all the virtual machines that are currently running on Azure today are all on Linux. Um, that percentage is slowly creeping up, and eventually, I wouldn't be surprised that when there would be a day that a majority of the virtual machines that are running on Azure today will be running on Linux. This is also the best choice for Microsoft workloads. So the subsequent webinars will be talking about what sort of cost savings you will be experiencing if you are a current Microsoft customer. There are tools that are available to allow you to migrate some of these workloads quite easily. Now, talking about storage. Now, once you have already picked what compute capability you'd like for your migration or for your innovation project, you now have to choose the storage, and there are several types of storage that you may use. So it can be object storage, data lake storage, file storage, disk storage, or even capabilities for you to transport data offline using either Azure Import Export or something called the Azure Data Box. There are disk storage capabilities that are available for every workload. Behind the scenes, we have storage that are actually running on either standard hard disk drives, standard SSD drives, and premium SSD drives. And the differences between these three, for example, are depends on the amount of IOPS that you would require, and the size of the storage that you would require. And of course, there will be subsequent differences in the cost per terabyte of the storage in terms of how you pay for the storage. So standard HDD being the less costly, and then compared that to premium SSD. We're also introduced a new type of storage where it is running on Ultra SSD devices. So the difference here is that you can now have storage subsystems which can be in 64 terabytes in size. You can achieve 160,000 IOPS, and so on and so forth. So again, you have a choice of what storage capability you will need depending on the application that you will have. So that's one of our jobs as a cloud solution architect is to choose what type of storage is required. We have the largest scale SAP HANA capabilities on Azure. So as you know, SAP HANA is using a database. HANA is a database that actually uses a lot of uses purely RAM. So we have, for example, the bare metal machines that have the ability, a capability to run SAP HANA, where databases can be as big as 24 terabytes. We also have the most number of SAP HANA certifications, and we can cite a lot of customers that are running SAP HANA on Azure. Now, for our high availability on Azure, so if you're using platform as a service on Azure, there are high availability SLAs that are available for each one. But if you're using Azure for IaaS, you'd have to be aware that sometimes you'd have to set your own high availability or HA capabilities within the virtual machine. So this slide kind of captures what we mean by SLA. So if for a single virtual machine, the SLA is 99.9%. If you want to further improve that SLA from 99.99%, 9% to 99.95%, then you would have to configure what is called an availability set. So you can also have availability zones to further improve your virtual machine SLA to 4 nines or 99.99%. So it means that your data is being replicated across multiple zones across the world, and you can even do site region recovery pairs. So the whole point that I'm trying to make here in this slide is that you have to be aware that high availability is configurable, and it is your choice on how you want to do it. You may want to choose to do 99.99% availability for your most critical workloads, but for some of your workloads that are not so critical and you're okay to sort of penny pinch on those type of workloads, you can actually choose single VM, which only has triple nines of SL. Now, this chart shows the best-in-class performance so far as of the day that we have demonstrated on Azure. So the largest virtual machines can support up to 960 terabytes, 960 CPUs, and 24 terabytes of RAM. Single disk remote storage can support up to 160,000 IOPS. And the fastest hybrid networking that we have achieved on a virtual machine has reached up to 100 gigabytes. So again, there is no problem. There's no technical problem that the Azure IaaS capabilities cannot solve. So it's really up to you on which type of service and what type of service level and what type of speed and throughput you will require for your application when you put together your Azure-based solution for migrate innovation. So switching over to the data side, so we kind of realized, and we all have to realize that there are realities that's gonna come up very soon. Data continues to grow. 80% of every enterprise that we have spoken to, 80% of all the enterprises that we have spoken to has a cloud-first strategy, and AI investment has increased 300-fold in 2017. So AI is currently everywhere. So the way we respond to that is that we are espousing what is called the modern data estate. The modern data estate essentially is the set of capabilities for you to store both structured and unstructured data on-premise and on the cloud, running it as operational databases, data warehouse, and data lakes, and giving you the ability to reason over all of your data using business insights or BI or artificial intelligence or AI. Now, the operational data services that are available on Azure today includes the SQL Server database. So this is the standard Microsoft SQL Server database, but we made it available as a cloud service on demand as a database as a service. We are also providing open source databases for PostgreSQL and MySQL and MariaDB as managed databases as well. So we essentially took the latest community managed versions of open source Postgre, MySQL, and MariaDB, slapped on an SLA to that, put in all the security that we can put in on as appropriate for a cloud service, and made all of that as a cloud service on demand. Redis cache for your application is also available, and we've also created Cosmos DB, which is a NoSQL database that is replicated and used across the world for a very good use case of Cosmos DB. Usually is when we see websites or transactional websites that require databases. The NoSQL approach appears to be the most popular one. So Cosmos DB is something that we have created based on the NoSQL specifications. Now, remember we talked about data modernization and how do we migrate or innovate your databases? There are many ways to modernize your relational database. So if you start from the bottom, if you take a look at you may have your existing, legacy SQL Server, Oracle database, Teradata, DB2, or you may have an existing MySQL, Postgre, or MariaDB installation on-prem. We have a first-party database migration service on Azure, and you can choose to migrate these databases to Azure SQL database. So a common example here is that if you have a SQL Server database from 2008 version up to the latest version of SQL Server, you can use the Azure Database Migration Service to literally lift and shift your database into the Azure SQL database. It's exactly the same Microsoft SQL database based on the latest version of SQL Server. Again, the only exception here is that this is a completely managed database by Microsoft, and you just simply subscribe to it. You can also run SQL Server on Azure VM. So you can spin up an Azure virtual machine, either running on Linux or running on Windows Server, and then install SQL Server there. If you're running with MySQL, Postgre, or MariaDB, you can also use the same database migration service to migrate the data to manage MySQL, Postgre, MySQL, and MariaDB. And as you can see across all of these three different options, you can actually save more. You can actually save more money, and these are more cost competitive platforms compared to that of what is available on the market today. Now, the other side of our database capabilities on Azure is also cloud scale analytics. You can build modern data warehouses, you can build advanced analytics capabilities, and you can also do real-time analytics capabilities across different components within Azure. So this slide talks about the different major steps that you will need to create a cloud scale analytics platform. You will need something to ingest the data across your different data from structured data sources and unstructured data sources. So we have something called one option there is to use the Azure Data Factory, which is a service on Azure. After you ingest the data, you need to store it. So one example of an Azure service where you can do that is the Azure Data Lake Storage, and then prepare the data by, for example, using something called Azure Databricks, serve the data by using the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and then reporting the data in the form of insightful reports and dashboards. So one example of that may be Power BI, or it can be Excel, or any other reporting mechanism that you may use. So this ingest, store, prep, and serve in reporting, this is just to let you all know that we have the components within Azure that can give all of these capabilities. All right, so this is just some more details on the most common components within Azure that's used for ingesting data, storing data, preparing data, serving data, and also reporting data. So, for example, Power BI, we've been leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Business Intelligence Analytics platform for 3 years now. It's starting to become the most popular reporting and dashboard analytics tool that's available on the market today. Now, let's talk about platform as a service or serverless computing. There are a lot of options that is made available for you across Azure. So we have serverless platforms for you to do web and mobile development and running web and mobile applications. We have options and capabilities if you want to containerize your applications and create a container environment. If you're doing the microservices approach, we have the platform for that as well. Integration services across different services within Azure, outside or even outside Azure, or even on-prem. If you are creating applications that are more event-driven, so example is an IoT application where your application is literally waiting for something to happen before it triggers other functions. That's called an event-driven type of applications. We have a platform for that as well. And AI-driven applications. The underlying capability of DevOps, which is the continuing improvement of the application while your application is on production. The platform to do DevOps is available on Azure as well. So talking about containers, because it seems to be pretty hot these days, you can use Azure Container Instances. We have our own interpretation, if you will, of the Kubernetes service, which is based on open source Kubernetes, called the Azure Kubernetes Service, or AKS. We have the Azure Service Fabric to put together event-driven applications, and we have the different sets of Azure App Services to run native code. So, for example, if you have PHP code or Java code that you want to run on a serverless manner without worrying about without worrying about figuring what virtual machine types are needed to run your applications, we have the Azure App Service where you simply put in the code and the app service will run for you. Now, switching gears over to AI, which is a pretty hot topic nowadays. Microsoft, we are building Azure, as Satya Nadella, our CEO, has talked about, to be the world's AI supercomputer. And these are just some of the AI breakthroughs that we have already achieved through our Microsoft research. So we have achieved human parity in terms of object recognition, speech recognition, machine translation, and machine reading comprehension. We have a whole slew of AI capabilities on Azure. So if you go to azure.com, you will see a whole set of Azure Cognitive Services, which allows, for example, your service, your application, your current or your new applications to be able to see, hear, do speech translation, do text to speech, to speech to text, and all these other capabilities that are already pre-trained and are available as available as on-demand services on Azure. We also have a bot service that allows you to create your own chatbot, train your own chatbot, and these bot services also has the ability to understand context and emotion within language. So again, these are already pre-trained. So the only thing that you need to do is to train the bot or create your own bot based on your own business context using your own question and answer pair, and then deploy that across your different channels in your or deploy your across your different channels. Like it may be deployed on a web app, can be deployed on a mobile app, or it can be deployed on existing messaging app, like for example Facebook Messenger. And then we have the machine learning capabilities, which are centered around Azure Databricks, Azure Machine Learning, using Azure AI infrastructure. So like I said, the Azure Bot Service is a built-in service that you include as part of your Azure service. It is purpose-built for bot development. There are templates that you can get you started. And then the Bot Framework SDK is also provides support for Node.js and .NET, and you can again connect this channel so you can have your own bot talking to your customers across, for example, Slack or Teams or even Facebook. So cognitive service capabilities gives your apps, websites, and bots human-like intelligence in terms of the ability to perceive the world, like object, scene, and activity detection, face recognition, landmark recognition. For speech capabilities, it gives your applications the ability to do speech to text or text to speech, understanding voice. We have a couple of customers that have actually used our cognitive services to do both face recognition and voice recognition for login capabilities. We also have language capabilities to do language detection, key phrase extraction, text sentiment analysis, which is pretty interesting and useful if, for example, if you want to extract emotions behind what people emotions behind text, so the application can understand intent. And then capabilities to enhance searches, not just web search, but searches across documents as well. So here's a great example of what I mean. So a smart agent, let's say you have your insurance company, you want to create as a chatbot. So this chatbot, you can create this using our bot framework. It has the ability to do natural language parsing to identify intent. It prompts you with choices, like for example, in this example, it is asking you it asks you for your social security number, and based on that, it determined that you have an existing insurance policy pulled out from your existing backend system or your existing CRM. And in this particular example, it is asking you whether you want to insure a vehicle. Notice that in this example, when it asks you to upload a picture of your vehicle, it even has cognition services to recognize the make, the model, and the color of your vehicle, so that the agent, or sorry, in this case, the bot is able to give you an estimate of the insurance premium. If you're not satisfied, so for example here, the bot also has the ability to analyze sentiment. So if you're not satisfied with what the services that you're getting, it can even be handed off to a live agent. So we also have Azure Search capabilities. So think of Azure Search as giving your website or giving your applications the ability to search across information within documents. So it uses all of these cutting-edge AI capabilities, such as key face extraction, sentiment analysis, face detection, to create a fully search index. So a great example of this is the JFK files example. So if you do a search in the internet today, unfortunately, because of this webinar, I'm not able to do of this webinar format. I'm not able to do a live demo. But essentially, if you go to the internet and look for Microsoft JFK files, you will find this example. So here's the background. When JFK was assassinated in the US, the Warren Commission, which was put together by the US government to investigate the assassination, compiled thousands upon thousands of documents from interviews, from transcripts, from investigations. And this was the 1960s, so a lot of these documents are actually typewritten and handwritten. They took a lot of pictures as well, and they are all kept in files. Now, these files recently have been declassified and have been, because they have the Freedom Information Act, have been declassified. So if you are, it is now publicly available. So what Microsoft did is that we took all of these files and then we scanned it, put it on Azure, and then created, in using Azure Search, created a searchable index, which then allows you to search across these files. So here's a screen cap of what I meant. So if you search for example, Lee Harvey Oswald, you will notice that part of the search results are scanned images of documents that have both typewritten and handwritten works that include Lee Harvey Oswald, as you can see here in the screen cap. Lee Harvey Oswald, someone wrote down the name Lee Harvey Oswald on a piece of paper, and our search capabilities was able to do OCR, or optical character recognition, not just on typewritten documents, but also face recognition and also handwriting recognition as well. So there are many platforms within Azure that you can do machine learning. So one approach here is the approach that most people will take is that if there's already a capability within the set of Azure AI tools, like for example, object recognition, face recognition, or any AI capabilities that has already been pre-trained, use that. But if you don't, but if you want to train your own AI um, to have its own intelligence, because you have quite unique needs that not necessarily has been captured by Microsoft yet, you can build your own machine learning capabilities. So you can use familiar data science tools such as Azure Notebooks, Jupyter. You can use deep learning frameworks that are popular today, like PyTorch, TensorFlow, and Onyx. These are open source deep learning frameworks that are also popular on other cloud platforms. You can use that as well. There are services that allow you to create your own machine learning models, such as Azure Databricks and machine learning. And then you run that on top of powerful infrastructure. So our AI capabilities run not just on top of CPUs and GPUs, but also field programmable gate arrays. So I hope this is a good example, but let's say you want to build an AI or a machine learning algorithm that understands or takes images from a live camera that watches over a factory, and you want the machine to be able to recognize if there are missing equipment, if there are people that are supposed to be wearing hard hats but they're not, and if there are flammable equipment that is near heat sources, so that it'll flag an alarm to the factory supervisor in case that happens. You can certainly program your own machine learning capabilities, machine learning routines on top of our platform to be able to recognize all of these scenarios. If there are if there are any components within Azure, so far I've talked about compute capabilities, the platform, the data platform, the application platform, and AI capabilities, networking capabilities, and so on. If all of these, all of what I've spoken about so far are what we call first-party Azure services. But it is also important to mention that we have thousands of partners that have built on top of Azure. So one of my favorite examples to illustrate this for people is that, for example, Microsoft Azure we have our own web application firewall, or WAF. So it's a fairly new service that we have just created and put it out live about 6 months ago. So part of the solution that you're putting together, for example, if it requires a web application firewall, you have two choices. You can use our first-party web application firewall, or as you can see here in the web page, or as you can see here in the slide, you can go to Azure Marketplace and choose a web application firewall from any of our very capable partners, such as Barracuda, Checkpoint, NetApp, Fortinet, F5, or anybody else that you can see here, the marketplace, to add their web application firewall and then run it on top of Azure. So we have thousands upon thousands of partners that does that. They have, they can be storage, it can be Red Hat Linux images, SUSE Linux images, firewalls, and even full-blown applications that run on top of Azure, like full-blown HR applications. You can find that all in the Azure Marketplace to complement or to extend the capabilities of Azure that you would normally get from first-party services. So here's the what the marketplace looks like on the Azure portal, which by the way is your primary interface to manage Azure. So if you go to Microsoft Azure portal and if you select marketplace, you just simply do a search of what you're trying to look for. So in this particular screenshot, I think what I was trying to do is look for an image for SQL Server 2017. So instead of installing SQL Server 2017 on a bare virtual machine, I just simply get an image from the marketplace and install from the image to the virtual machine. That's much faster that way. I can do exactly the same thing for third party or partner ISV services on marketplace. So for example, if I wanted to do Veritas backup, for instance, I just simply go to the marketplace, search for Veritas, and then create a Veritas backup image on the virtual machine that I've just created instead of installing Veritas software on the virtual machine as you would normally do on-prem. Now, when you modernize with managed services, if you take a look at the left side, there are certain challenges. You know, infrastructure management, so unfortunately we spend a lot of time on, can slow down business processes. It's you can easily fall down the rat hole of inefficient resource management. You lock into a limited stack and so on. So these are all the things that we have experienced on-prem. On Azure, on the other hand, managed services allows you to focus on the apps, not the admin, and speeding up the deployments. So if we are using cloud services instead of worrying about the infrastructure, then all of the applications that we intend to deploy to users and to customers are become much faster. Managed services also support all stacks. So containers run on any cloud. So you may have applications that are currently running on containers, applications that are currently running on virtual machines, and so on. But the important thing is that you have a single management portal or management interface to look at all of that. All right, now let's talk about hybrid. Now, what we are seeing in the IT industry is that we have certain trends. So the industry is now gravitating towards hyper-converged infrastructure. In the old days, you would have to buy networking, compute, and storage components separately, but now it's all compacted in a nice-looking, compact, small appliance where everything is already in that appliance. So you have networking, storage, and compute in a single appliance, and everything is managed through software. And the second trend that we are seeing is that, like I said, we are starting to see applications which are starting to become containerized. And then a lot of the enterprises that we are talking to right now, I'm sure a majority of you here in this webinar are also considering taking the first few steps into the cloud, not to do full cloud, but rather doing cloud. And there are many reasons why customers are going to hybrid. You want to reduce your data center footprint. You want to utilize remote services, and you also want to speed up software development. And I guess the biggest reason why people are going to hybrid is that because you already have existing data center investments that you want to maximize. So therefore, you would like to maximize these investments by not getting rid of the data center entirely, but extending your data center capabilities into the cloud. So Microsoft Azure is the only consistent and comprehensive hybrid cloud. Well, when we say hybrid, it means that we're not just talking about connecting your data center to the cloud service provider and calling that hybrid. No, hybrid for us means that you have a common developer platform, you have a common DevOps platform, you have a common data platform, common identity, and a single pane of glass to do security and management, whether they're on-premise or on the cloud. It's consistency. It's consistency meaning consistent data services, whether it's on-premise or the cloud. It's not two different data services that you're trying to put together, but it's exactly the same one. The only difference is that one is running on the cloud and one is running on-prem. So there are two hybrid approaches. One is what we call consistent, which is bringing cloud services on-premise, and the other one is connected, which means that you're using on-premises resources, but you're expanding it or enhancing it using the public cloud. So to do this, we have two approaches for the hybrid platform. So if you want to use public cloud services, we have the Azure Public Cloud Services, as you can see here. So it has cloud compute, storage, and networking, and Azure hardware. On the on-premise side, if you want to continue to use if you want to operate or run cloud services on-prem, you can use what is called Azure Stack. And I'll talk about a little bit about Azure Stack later on. Azure Stack essentially are services of Azure that you can run on premises. So if you want to use for example, virtual machines on Windows and Linux, and continue to use that in a consistent manner on-prem, as if you were using public cloud, except that it's running on-premise on your own data center. You can use web apps, you can use Resource Manager, you can even use some third-party marketplace applications on-premise using Azure Stack. And then on the extreme right side, you have Azure Stack HCI solutions, which means that we have partnered with hyperconverged manufacturers such as HP, Dell, Fujitsu, and all of these hyperconverged servers capabilities. And what we've done is that we have created Windows Server 2019 to run on top of these HCI solutions or HCI servers. And then natively, it has the capability to extend to Azure. So for example, it has the ability to do backup and site recovery to Azure automatically as part of the operating system and the HCI capabilities. So Azure Stack, what it is that it is a completely autonomous cloud. So think about Azure running on an appliance, and this appliance is deployed in your own data center. It runs, you can consistently run application development operations. Azure services are available on premise. It is also a purpose-built integrated system available from our partners HPE, Dell, Lenovo, um, and Cisco. So there are many instances where a customer may want to use Azure Stack. So if you are in an edge or disconnected scenario, meaning you don't have internet connection, but you still want to run, or you made already a decision to make your applications cloud native, if you will, to run on the public cloud. And also, how do you run cloud native applications in an environment where there's no way to go to the cloud? So you simply, in essence, bring the cloud to that environment by running your cloud environment on Azure Stack and deploying the Azure Stack appliance there. There are also reasons why you want to use Azure Stack for regulatory and data sovereignty reasons. So if you have for whatever reason want the data and the application to remain resident in the country or within a certain locality, you can certainly use Azure Stack for that. There are many customer scenarios to use for Azure Stack. So one of the most common ones you can see here. So let me talk about a couple of them. So one of them would be, say, for example, for financial services, financial modeling. When you do financial modeling, you'll have to combine both account level data and the account level data or data from each of the customer accounts, and also macro data. Now you can get macroeconomic data or even financial data, external financial data from the cloud, but in some countries, specific account level data cannot be put on the cloud. So you can actually now have a scenario wherein you can combine data from both on-premise and from on cloud sources to create your financial model through Azure Stack. So that's one great usage of Azure Stack. So eventually, this is the vision. We have, sorry, I need to make a change here. So 54 Azure regions all over the world. We have hundreds of service providers running Azure Stack. So we have a few telcos and even local managed cloud service providers. Um, PLDT will soon be one of them. So they will have Azure Stack. So essentially, you can run Azure services on Azure servers owned by PLDT running on PLDT data centers. But you're using the same Azure services as you would on the Azure public cloud. The only difference is that these services are in the Philippines. And then you see here in the slide thousands of enterprises. What that simply means is that we have other enterprises who choose to run Azure Stack for themselves. So now you now have a choice of where you want to deploy your application. Do you want to use the public cloud? Do you want to use the service provider provided cloud through Azure Stack, or you want to run your own Azure Stack? And then eventually, what we intend to do, or not intend because this is already happening now, is to provide consistency across the cloud and the edge, not just putting Azure cloud capabilities or for example, AI capabilities, not just on the public cloud and on Azure Stack, but we also want to put it on the edge, such as so we have capabilities such as Azure IoT Edge, meaning putting some portions of AI and Azure AI IoT capabilities at in edge computing devices. Open. Now, we have Microsoft has been a top contributor to GitHub for quite some time now. So when Satya Nadella, our CEO, took over as Microsoft CEO in 2014, we have boldly declared that we love Linux. So we now, so fast forward now, well, before Microsoft acquired GitHub, Microsoft was actually one of the, if not the top contributors of GitHub. So you see here the timeline and examples of all the contributions that we have made to GitHub. You can use all the open source tools that you like. Some of our biggest customers, they don't own a single Microsoft license, but they are running all open source and they are all running on Azure. So these are just examples of all of the open source capabilities that you can run on Azure today. So whether it's DevOps, management, applications, app frameworks, databases, or infrastructure. So we support the open source ecosystem. A significant portion of our engineering team are actually open source trained or have open source pedigree. And like I said, you can choose to run Joomla as your application platform. You can use Chef or Puppet for management. You can use MongoDB as your database. You can use Node.js as your primary app framework. All of them will run on Azure. So in fact, we can boldly declare that we run more open source platforms on Azure compared to other cloud providers. And finally, Microsoft Azure. These are just a sample of all of the compliance standards that we have that Microsoft has actually already passed. So this includes global standards, regional standards, industry level standards such as HIPAA for healthcare, US government, and even country level standards. Like for example, there are security standards for cloud services that are required for Singapore, that was produced by the Singapore government. It's called the Singapore MTCS, and we have passed that, and we continue to be audited across all of these compliance capabilities on a yearly basis. Our Microsoft security capabilities, we spend about $1 billion plus on annual investments on security research and implementation. We have over 3,500 security experts, and the unique thing about Microsoft is that we receive trillions of diverse signals. So imagine this: you got millions of Windows and Microsoft Office users that are connecting to the Microsoft Cloud to get updates on services or service updates, so we know what's happening in the world right now. We scan billions of emails as part of our Office 365 services to protect our customers. We scan billions of documents on our SharePoint and our OneDrive and our Teams platform. So we know, our security team literally knows what's going on out there, so we will be able to provide proactive protection to all of our customers where they are. So we get powerful protection. We have deep security and investment and expertise, threat visibility, like I said, and we also lead the industry in terms of building the scale and building our capabilities over time. So we have evolved into one of the biggest security companies, if not the biggest security company in the entire world, because of the scope of the services that we provide to thousands upon thousands of organizations and millions of users across the world. So, as a summary, we are the most trusted and compliant cloud. We have over 85 compliance offerings. We have 40 plus offerings for regulated industry, and we also continue to provide guidance and continue to partner with the world's regulatory bodies to ensure that that cloud computing is safe and transparent. Within Azure, we also have a built-in set of intelligence services to allow you to manage the environment effectively on your own. I already mentioned that we have migration services, security services, protection services for you to do backup and disaster recovery, monitoring services for you to monitor your entire Azure infrastructure from virtual machines to application level monitoring, configuration, and also governance, creating policies on how your users use or provision cloud services, cost management in order for you to take a look at how you are managing your how you are spending on cloud and how you're spending in Azure, and it even has the capabilities to make recommendations on how you can further cost optimize your Azure. Right. So just a little bit on migration. We have a complete and extensible user migration experience. So if you go to azure.com/migrate, you will see there a lot of tools that would allow you to do assessment of your workloads, testing of migration of workloads, giving you advice on how to optimize your workloads, and finally securing and managing your workloads. It also has an Azure TCO calculator. It also has access to Azure Expert Managed Service Providers and System Integrators. So we have two main migration tools. These are first-party migration tools, by the way. These are and these and apart from this, we also have third-party and partner migration tools. So Azure Migrate, they do is they do VMware and Hyper-V virtual machine assessment. So the Azure Migrate in essence takes a look at your entire VMware and your Hyper-V estates and gives you recommendations on how much it's going to cost and what it's going to take to migrate all of these virtual machines to the cloud. The data migration service, on the other hand, does exactly the same thing, except that it does it across databases. So you may have Oracle databases, you may have SQL or open source databases. It will do a comprehensive evaluation and give you a report on how much it will take and what type of effort it requires to move the databases to the cloud. As a reminder, we have a webinar on this, and I hope you will be able to attend this. Windows Server 2008 R2 is going to end of support and on January 14, 2020. SQL Server 2008 and SQL Server 2008 R2 has already ended support last July 9, 2019. So the good news is that if you still currently have Windows Server 2008 R2 and SQL Server 2008 R2, and if you move these to Azure, you will get extended security updates on Azure for free. As long as you still pay for the Azure service to run these end of support workloads, you will get 3 years of security updates after support on premises ends. So if you have an application that still runs SQL Server 2008, if you move that to Azure, you will get extended security updates for free. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay something like 75% of the license cost to continue to run them on premise and to continue to get extended support. Okay, I'm going to skip some of these parts. We also have something called the Azure Hybrid benefit. So the Azure Hybrid benefit is a benefit that is unique only to Microsoft customers. So if you are, so in essence, no hybrid benefit is that if you are a Microsoft customer and you are currently holding licenses for Windows Server and SQL Server software assurance, because of that software assurance investment that you have made, you can actually get significant discounts if you want to move those workloads to Azure. So some of the discounts can be as low as 30 something percent. It can be as high as 60%. Now, how do you buy Microsoft Azure? How is Microsoft Azure available? So the most common mode is consumption service. So we charge Microsoft charges these Azure capabilities based on consumption. So, for example, virtual machines, dollar. There's a rate per hour. Websites, there's a dollar per hour. Database, there's a dollar per hour. For networking, for instance, for egress, there is a certain amount that is charged based on the amount of data that is going out. For user plans, there are also rarely, although not very common, very rare, that there are some Azure capabilities that are based on user subscriptions, such as Active Directory, Azure Support, etc. And the marketplace capabilities, these are all third party, so therefore it depends on the third party partner and how much they want to charge for these marketplaces. How do you buy Microsoft Azure? You can do it via the Microsoft website. So just simply go to azure.com and then pull out your credit card. Put in your credit card information. You can start using Azure. So all of your usage of Azure, like I said, is actually metered and will be charged off of your credit card. You can also do it through a volume licensing agreement, an enterprise agreement, or an SCE or server cloud enrollment. So for our enterprise customers that are listening to this webinar, you know what I mean. You can actually acquire Azure through your EA or your SCE. You can also through the Cloud Solution Provider program. So we have a number of partners that have already created solutions or services on top of Azure and where their Azure cost is already embedded. That is called the Cloud Solution Provider. Or you can do it through Microsoft through what is the new agreement called the Microsoft Customer Agreement. Okay, and these are the different services types of consumption plan services that are available for each. How do you know how much you're going to spend for Azure? We have an online Azure pricing calculator. So you see the URL over here. So if you're a first timer or if you're not really an expert on Azure, I would suggest that you contact anyone from our Microsoft Solutions team or the Microsoft partner that services you to help you estimate how much you're going to use for Azure. Because like I said, a lot of the Azure services are consumption-based services. So therefore, are consumption-based services. So therefore, you will need to first determine what type of services you will require, what kind of services, and make an estimate on using the calculator on how much of them you're going to be using them for. And the calculator will give you an approximation of how much you're going to use them. But again, since these are metered services, it wouldn't be exactly down to the cent. So the calculator is just simply a tool for you to estimate how much you're going to use. How do you pay for consumption services? Well, some customers prefer to do what is called a monetary commitment. This is available only on a licensing agreement. Uh, so essentially, a monetary commitment is you're committing to, as part of your contract, say for example, $100,000, and once the services are used, the amount of services that you're using is credited against the monetary commitment that you have just made. So think of it as like a prepaid service. So a lot of customers like this because you have best price protection for 3 years, and at the same time, you also have the ability to have fixed budgeting. Monthly in arrears means that whatever you are consuming will be charged to you monthly in arrears. So, for example, if you get a bill in October, then you will be charged for the amount of Azure services that you've used in the last 30 days. So this is available via WebDirect, cloud service provider, or even the customer agreement. Okay, so we have seen customers that have experienced lower TCO by moving to Azure. So 78% by migrating data centers to Azure, 68% by rehosting applications on Azure PaaS, 63% savings by re-architecting applications on Azure, and 5x lower cost for Microsoft workloads compared to that of AWS. So for more information of that, go to the TCO calculator on azure.com/TCO. So fair bit of warning though, when you go to the TCO calculator, it will ask a lot of questions. But if you're really serious about figuring out the TCO of the total cost of ownership of moving to Azure, it will ask you a lot of questions like how many servers, how many applications, what type of databases, how old are these applications, so on. So once you give comprehensive, detailed answers, the TCO calculator will actually give you a great report that you can show your boss or your financial decision maker to give justification on why it makes sense to move to Azure and on the cloud. So this is what it looks like. You define first your workloads. There's a whole bunch of drop downs over here um, for you to answer very detailed questions about what your environment looks like. And then it'll give you a report that looks like this. So it will, for example, say if over 5 years with Microsoft Azure, your estimated cost savings will be this amount. So your journey to the cloud starts with resources. So you can go to azure.com/migrate, like I mentioned in one of the slides. We have a pretty simple but comprehensive uh, methodology in terms of helping you migrate to Azure. We have several programs such as Fast Track for Azure that has proven practices and design principles to allow you to move to Azure. And more importantly, we have ongoing training. So once you learning about the cloud and learning how to migrate to cloud does not end with migration, but it also starts a learning journey for you and your technical and your business team on how to run your IT and how to run your infrastructure in a more efficient manner. So Microsoft Learn is an on-demand learning resource for your team. Continue to learn to do that. So how do you stay informed of changes on Azure? Go to azure.com/updates. Subscribe to the RSS feed. The Twitter handle, Azure support is also a pretty good resource. And one thing to remember, the reason why I put this slide up here is that Azure is an evergreen service. What we mean by an evergreen service, it means that it is ever changing. There are services that are being added, there are services that are deprecated. That's one of the hallmarks of running in a cloud environment. So the cloud service provider just makes changes, and you need to be aware of these changes even before they happen. But of course, we always assure that these changes will take effect um, you will be informed these changes way before these changes take effect. You can also do azure.com/products by region, so you can be familiar with what types of solutions are available per regions, because not all of the services are available in region. So for example, if you've chosen to deploy all of your Azure services on the Southeast Asia region, which is our Singapore region, there are some services which are not available there. But of course, it doesn't stop you from using services that are available on other regions as well. It's just the physical location of where the services is served out of from. It's actually not a question of availability of whether you can use it. So it doesn't mean that if a service is only available in North America, you have to be in North America. No, we have customers that use services that are served from all over the 54 different regions of Azure. If you are ready to get started, you can actually get an Azure free account by going to azure.com/free. You will get a $200 credit, 12 months of free popular services, and 25 services that are always for free. We do require credit card information, but don't worry, your credit card won't be charged immediately. Remember, you have $200 of free credit, and as long as you don't go over the limits of what you see here in front of you right now, 750 hours per month for Linux virtual machines, 750 hours per month for Windows virtual machines. You have storage, databases, so everything, the essentials that you will need to start experimenting with Azure are already part of the $200 credit. These are all the other services that you will get for free and will not be credited against your $200 credit. So again, if you only go over the limit in the previous slide, then that's the only time your $200 credit will be charged. And once your $200 credit goes close to zero, you will be sent a friendly email or a reminder in your Azure portal to ask you if you want to continue to use the services. Because if you say yes, then your credit card will start be charging. If you want to learn at your own pace, then you go to um, if you can go to Microsoft Learn. Just go to just Google or Bing Microsoft Learn. You will have here a online courses on Azure. So if you select your role, it can be administrator, if you're the administrator, if you're an AI engineer, data scientist, a developer, a functional consultant, a solution architect, just choose your role over here, and then the result in the next pages will be a curated set of video-based, text-based, and even labs that are made available for you to learn Azure based on the role that you have just selected in the There is a specific tool just for AI, so it's called aischool.microsoft.com. And finally, we also have free professional training, free online training. Like I tell people all the time nowadays, this is a great time to be alive because a lot of this training content is online and available for free for everyone. So if you want to learn the basics of data science, artificial intelligence, IoT, cybersecurity, big data, and data analysis, go to myacademy.microsoft.com. The instructors there are not just Microsoft professionals, but also professors from prestigious universities and colleges that teach these courses as their day job. And complete documentation is available on Microsoft Docs. Just go to docs.microsoft.com and then select Azure, and all the documentation, code samples, video examples of how to put together certain components within Azure are already here. Wow, that was a long webinar. I apologize for that, for going 10 minutes over time. If you enjoy this type of format, we have our next webinar scheduled over here. So if you go to, I don't want to talk to each one of these, but next week our topic will be Windows Server and SQL Server 2008 end of support. What can we do? What are the implications? And so on. And the next topic after that is how do you migrate your data center to Azure? The next topic after that is we're going to take a step back and discuss what are the typical cloud strategies, or how do you think about your cloud journey, if you will. And then we have the other topics in the next subsequent weeks, all the way up to December. So if you want to register for these webinars, just go to aka.ms/azurepage events and put in your name, and you will then be automatically registered to these webinars and listen to me talk about all of these topics and answer any of your questions that you may have. All right, folks, thank you very much. I apologize again for going overtime. That's a big topic. I usually do spend a lot of time, and we've actually compressed a half day actual seminar on an overview of Azure in a manner of 1 hour and 10 minutes. So thank you very much. Thank you in advance for those of you who are listening to this via recording. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you for your time today, and I hope to see you soon in our future webinars. If you have any more questions, my email address is below. If I don't know the answer to your questions, I will definitely find someone who can answer your question and relay that answer to you. So again, once again, thank you very much and have a great day, and I'll see you in our future events. Bye-bye.